this is Mike from Mike's Do It Yourself. Today I want to show you how to replace your upper ball joint on your front suspension of a Toyota 4Runner 2000. So it's a third gen. This would be from 96 to 2002. Now this is the ball joint that we're going to replace right here. And the preferred method would be to take the spindle off. So that's what I'm going to show you. That's going to be the easiest way to do it, because we're going to put this in a vise and then we will press out this upper ball joint and then we'll press in the new ball joint. So to get started, you'll want to jack up your vehicle, place it on jack stands, remove your tire, and the next step will be to go ahead and take this front hubcap or this cap off right here. Now it may be stuck on there, so we'll just spray it a little bit with PB Blaster. So to get started, we'll go ahead and put PB Blaster around that seal and also the wheel studs, and that way it'll make it easier to take this off, to take the rotor off. And then what we'll need to do is take a small screwdriver and just pry between the two, and that will let this hubcap or this cap come free. So we'll go ahead and use a screwdriver and just push it all the way around with a rubber. We'll be able to tap it with a rubber mallet. And that way it'll separate the two. Just rotate it and do that all the way around. You can try to use a pry bar. Eventually it'll pop out. After you get your cap off, you want to go ahead and take your cotter pin out. And then you have just a keeper for the cotter pin, and it keeps that nut right where it should be. So that just fits on right like that. So we'll remove that. And then what you'll need to do is have a 35mm socket. That's what this is going to be. That'll be 35mm. And then you'll need someone to either hold the brakes for you, put a pry bar in here somewhere across to where it won't move on you. Throw some PB Blaster on it to make it move. After you get your axle nut off, you want to make sure that your CV axle can be pushed in. So as long as it can be pushed in a little bit, you're fine. Now you may need to tap it with a rubber mallet just to break it free. But if it's able to move, then you're fine. After that, we'll go ahead and loosen up these two bolts that connect your brake hose or your ABS line to your spindle. And the bottom one is going to be 10mm, and we'll remove that. So that's the bottom bolt here. And then the top bolt will be a 10mm, and it's right here. Get you in on this a little bit better. So it'll be this bolt right here. So we'll go ahead and remove that. And then you can open up this clamp and remove it from the spindle. And this one will just be free floating, so it'll be able to move, and it's off the spindle right there. Now the next thing what we can do is loosen up the bolts for the caliper, and they're going to be two 17mm bolts. And let me show you that right here. So those two 17mm bolts are going to be here and down here at the bottom. So right there and right there. And that way we can get the caliper off after we do the ABS sensor and the tie rod end. So we'll get those off next. And you'll need a 22mm, I believe, for that bottom nut. And now I've already taken mine off, but you'll want to take the cotter pin out of here and then go ahead and loosen this up and take it off. And then if you have a tie rod or a ball joint separator, we'll go ahead and use that on it. Just put it between the ball joint and the spindle. I recently replaced my tie rod in, and I didn't tighten it down all the way because I just put in a new power steering rack. So I didn't have to push very hard, but I was able to push it up with the tie rod end remover, and then it pushed on the center threads, and it just pushed it up out of the spindle. So you want to just move that out of the way. So once you've done that, we'll go ahead and work on the ABS sensor here, and that's a 10mm bolt. And you'll have to wiggle it a little bit back and forth because there is an O-ring right here that we'll put some silicone grease on when we reinstall it. But that will be later. And now we're able to take off the brake caliper. We'll just remove those two 17mm bolts. That's one. And two. And then I'm going to use a bungee cord. You can use whatever you like. Well, you just want to support it somehow so it doesn't fall. I can put this up somewhere so it doesn't fall. And then we can take off our rotor. If you're not able to take off your rotor right away, you may need to put some PB Blaster or some spray in here that will let it loosen up. And then if you have to, you may just need to hit it with a rubber mallet a few times to knock it loose. Now before we loosen up either the ball joint at the bottom or the 4 bolts at the very bottom that connect the ball joint to the spindle, what we're going to do is have this ball joint right here separated from the control arm. So we'll do that first, just so that this thing is not moving around a lot. So we'll go ahead and straighten out the cotter pin. We'll go ahead and remove it. And then we'll go ahead and loosen the castle nut. Now mine's going to be a 21mm. I guess the bottom is actually a 21mm for the nut that goes on to the tie rod end, the castle nut. So 21 millimeters, the actual size for that. Yours may be different. And again, you might need to spray some separator spray or PB blaster to get that separated. So now what we can do is go ahead and get a tie rod or ball joint remover on this, and we'll go ahead and crank it down to push the threads down into the control arm. Before we remove the lower ball joint from the spindle, or the bolts that connect the lower ball joint to the spindle, we're going to go ahead and remove the upper ball joint from the upper control arm. And the first step would be to remove the cotter pin, go ahead and take off the castle nut. Now this is actually a 21 millimeter, and I resized the tie rod castle nut, and that was a 21 millimeter also. So yours may be different. Now we'll just need a separator to separate the ball joint from the control arm. This is what it's going to look like here. So we'll just go ahead and loosen it up. Put it around here like that. And it should push the threads down in to the control arm and out. So it is supported by the lower control arm and the ball joint that goes through the middle of the spindle. So you don't have to worry about this dropping out once this is separated up here. So this is the original ball joint on the spindle, so it may take a little while to free it. And there it goes. Once it's freed, so you can see it's really split there. The boot is gone. Not a whole lot of play as far as up and down, no up and down play. You do have a lot of free movement play just around. But no up and down movement. So if yours is in really good shape and you don't have a whole lot of movement, you can actually buy a reboot kit for this and just reboot it. So that is one option that you're able to do. But for now, go ahead and put it back in there. And then we can either take out the lower ball joint or remove the 4 bolts that attach the ball joint to the spindle. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and remove the 4 bolts that attach the lower ball joint to the spindle. Those are going to be 14 millimeter. And you may find this easier if you do this before you remove your tie rod, but then they just won't move as easily. So you can always reconnect your tie rod and then loosen them that way. I went ahead and reconnected the tie rod. Once all your bolts are removed, you can go ahead and push your tie rod in back through. And now your spindle should be able to come out. Just be careful. Make sure you hold it on both ends when you're pulling it out. Push the CV axle in and then hold it from the upper part. And it's all out. Once you have it disconnected, you can look at your ABS ring and check your seal just to make sure there's no indentions or breaks or distortions in it. Now to get the ball joint out, we'll need to take off the clip that holds the boot on. So we'll do that first. And you may need some needle nose or a pick to get that out, or to get that off. And then if you have a vise, it may be easier just to hold it in a vise, because this will move on you a lot. So there's the rubber boot, what's left of it. And there's the clip, or that's the boot. That's the boot wire that goes around the bottom to hold the boot on. And then you'll have a C-clip here. I don't know if you can see it, but it's right here at the bottom. And then we'll have to just pry that out. And then we can push. We'll have to pry this off, the C-clip, and then we can push this out of the top of the spindle. If you have some C-clamp pliers, now would be a good time to use them. Once you've got this C-clamp separated enough, you can put a flathead screwdriver in there to pry it out. Now, this may pop off, so just be careful and use eye protection. Take off the rest of that rubber boot that's at the bottom. So if you have a kit like this, you need to go ahead and find the right ones that you need to press that ball joint out. So we're going to need to grab the right one that can push it out, and a cup that can receive it. So this is basically what we're doing here. Let me show you. And this has a nice chart here for whatever vehicle you're working on. So basically what we're finding is an adapter for the top that it can fit through. We're finding the receiving tube and the bottom plate that the C-frame will push onto, or the forcing screw will push onto. So we need to find those. And like I said, there is a chart in here that you might be able to use, but we're just going to go ahead and see if we can find it without that. And this is the removing adapter. So this will go on the bottom of the screw that goes through here, the forcing screw. So we'll just install it like this. This forcing screw. Now this is the installing adapter, so it fits on there like that. receiving adapter or removing adapter. Goes on the bottom. The receiving tube. So the receiving tube will be what goes on the bottom of this, and that'll be the receiving tube area. So we'll look for that, the receiving tube. Now I did buy a special kit. These are 4 Toyota 4Runners, so you may need to do that just so you get the right or proper size. So this one looks like it will fit directly on there, like that. So this is what the setup looks like to take the ball joint out. Now you can see that I've taken out the C-clip. So you just use the impact and make sure it stays straight. So I'm tightening this by hand. You can see I've gotten it out a little bit already, but that seems to be working the best. I'm just tightening it by hand, and it's slowly moving that ball joint out. You can see it's almost out, just a few more turns, and it should pop right out. Now here's the setup that I have to install it. And so you'll just want to put your impact drill on the top of that, and go slowly and make sure that it stays nice and straight as it's going up into the spindle. So far it looks pretty straight. And you just want to make sure it's all the way in before you put the C-clip back on. Now as you can see, I got the ball joint out. I was able to use a ball joint remover, and basically all I did was have the ball joint like that and put this tool right like this, and then I tighten it up and then slowly push the ball joint through the top of the spindle here. So now that it's out, I wanted to show you what came with the other kit that I bought that was made just for Toyota. Now they're actually asking for 2 more adapters, which I didn't buy, and I don't have the bottom adapter, and I didn't buy this cup, but I think the kit only comes with this removing adapter right here. So these are OTC part numbers, and it's 38354 for removal. It goes on the bottom of the C-clamp. And then the adapter is this 313968, and the receiving cup to install is 38355A. But this is what comes with the kit, I believe, is just this top one here when you buy a Toyota 4Runner 96 to 2002 install kit. But if you can find these separately and just buy a basic ball joint C-clamp, or just buy a basic kit and then buy these cups, you should be able to get the job done. Or you could do what I did to remove it, is just use your ball joint remover and put this, make sure this is in a vise, and then just slowly tighten that till the ball joint pushes through the other side. It's nice and clean. Go ahead and get the new ball joint and see what we need to put it in. It's going to go like that. So basically, you may have to take your rubber boot off, but the way this is designed, you won't need to. Now it does come with a new C-clip or another clamp that goes around it. It comes with the new lock washer, castle nut. So it comes with a new castle nut, new Zerk fitting for the bottom, a new clamp that goes around it once it's pushed in, and an easy clip to put in there instead of having to do a cotter pin. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take all three to the vise and see which will work best. This will be the receiving cup that takes the ball joint as it's pushed in, and I'll either try this one, or this one to push it into the spindle itself. Now I was able to get the ball joint into the spindle. I used number 17 receiving cup and number 2 adapter out of this kit. And this kit is the OMT 23-piece master ball joint U-joint service toolkit. Now that it's pressed in, you go ahead and put the clamp around the bottom here. You can see that. So we'll just put it around the top here. And then if you have snap ring pliers, go ahead and use those and open this up. Now instead of using that other clamp, I'm just going to clean up the old C-clamp and use that. These are easier to get on and off. You just got to be careful because they do have sharp ends, so you just want to be careful with your boot so you don't tear it or rip it. Once you got that spindle ready to go back in, you just want to check your bushings that are on your control arm, and mine needed to be replaced. Now you can see these have already been replaced, but to get that control arm out, there's just a centering bolt. So it goes like this. This would be the left side. This is the driver's side. So it would just go like that. And so you definitely want to check these bushings. And to get that out, I had to remove a relay that was inside the engine bay. But basically, you're removing this nut on the end of it and then pulling this towards the front of the vehicle. And that's how you remove that control arm. And now would be the best time to do it if you needed to replace it while the spindle's out. And you can see how the washers go on. Go ahead and put this back on before we get that spindle back in. And this is what the old bushings look like. See how they're cracked all around the center there, around the outside. This one. And then the other side, that one didn't look too bad. I mean, it's cracked around the middle there. And then the outside on this one. So that's what you're looking for, any kind of cracks or distortion in the rubber section there. And then you may have is that for the ABS? Yeah, you'll have another ABS connector that you'll need to take off, and that just goes into this point right here, or this area right here. It just screws into there like that. So to get this back on, it may be easier to have somebody help you hold it. And just be careful when you're having these put in, or you do it yourself. I don't have a hydraulic press in my garage, so I wasn't able to get these pressed in or out. But just make sure that you don't push these too far in, because you need a big enough gap here. And so what I'm going to have to do, I'm going to have to shave off a little bit of this metal on both sides, just to make it to be able to fit onto that frame section, because right now it's not fitting. So I'm going to take these over to the grinder and just grind this down a little bit on both sides. Once you get the control arm bushings on in there, just trim down a little bit, enough to where it'll fit in. You can go ahead and put your bolt through there. And again, it goes this way, and you may need to maneuver this washer in and out just to fit it into that space that's in your engine compartment. Once you get the bolt pushed through, just put your washers back on. And again, it is concave instead of convex on the outer and the inner washer. And then we'll just hand tighten this for now. We're not going to tighten it until we get it on the ground. So we'll leave that the way it is for the moment. And then the next thing you want to check before you put the spindle in is your lower ball joint. Now I have a little bit of play in this, but no up and down movement, no real side to side, but it's just extremely worn. It's not very tight in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace it. It's probably been 7 to 10 years since I've replaced this, so I'm going to go ahead and replace it. You'll want to remove the lower ball joint here. So we'll just get a pair of needle nose pliers and remove that castle nut. So we can remove that castle nut. First we'll take off the cotter pin. I just replaced the lower control arm, so it should come off of that ball joint pretty easily. So we'll go ahead and replace that, throw that one out. And the boot isn't torn on this, but like I said, there's just a lot of play in it. Not up and down, but just side to side. A lot of movement. So really, it's still usable, but it's been such a long time since I replaced it. I'll go ahead and replace it. And then usually when you get a new lower ball joint on these 4Runners, you'll have new hardware that goes with it too. This is the new one, and it does have a Zerk fitting spot to the inside, so you'll want to put that Zerk fitting on that before you install it. That way you're able to grease it up whenever you need to. So we'll go ahead and tighten this up. And for this new part, it should be a 10 millimeter to tighten this up. Now the left side part number is going to be K90262 if you want to do a aftermarket Moog ball joint, and then on the right side it's going to be K90263. And you can have this face towards the front or towards the back, whichever you like, whatever you think might be easier to get to. So it should come with a new castle nut and cotter pin. So go ahead and use those. And then the torque on this is going to be 105 foot-pounds. And then if the cotter pin doesn't fit in after you've torqued it, you'll want to tighten it up just a little bit more to get that cotter pin to fit in there. Now after you got your lower ball joint in, or you're using your lower ball joint, you want to go ahead and get the spindle in. And the spindle will set on these two dowel pins right here, or collars. And if you put a new ball joint in, you're going to have new bolts. And the new bolts come with a Loctite. Now this is a red Loctite. I'm going to use blue Loctite on mine. And the torque on these bolts that go to the spindle or through the spindle here are going to be 59 foot-pounds. Now we can put the spindle back on. Now you'll want to rest it on these dowels of the lower ball joint and then put it through the CV axle, and at the same time maneuvering the upper ball joint into the upper control arm. So we'll go ahead and wait on the upper control arm. We'll get two of the bottom bolts in first. I'm going to go ahead and get the bolt started for the lower ball joint. Just put a little bit on the threads there. Somehow that red Loctite opened up, and I'll have to get that off of this end of this bolt. Now we'll torque those lower bolts that go into the lower ball joint. That's going to be a 17 millimeter, and it's 59 foot-pounds. Now that's going to be for the aftermarket. If you get OEM it may have a different torque, so just keep that in mind. Now before we torque that at the bottom, we'll go ahead and put the upper ball joint into the control arm, just so it won't move on us as we're tightening it. Put a washer on top, or your castle nut. Once all of those lower ball joint bolts are secured, you can go ahead and tighten up the upper ball joint. Now the upper ball joint is going to be 80 foot-pounds, so you want to go ahead and tighten that up to 80 foot-pounds. And there again, I'm using a 1 1/16 to go onto that. They put a bigger size castle nut on that. Now that's 80 foot-pounds. You may need to torque it a little bit more just to get your cotter pin in. For mine, it's a cotter type of key, so we'll go ahead and just put that in. That should stay. Now we'll go ahead and work on the caliper bolts. Those are going to be 90 foot-pounds. You'll be able to turn your spindle just to get to it. We'll need to put the brake disc on. And I like to put a little bit of anti-seize on the hub here, just to keep the brake disc and the hub from sticking so bad or getting rusty and sticking. So I'll just put a little bit on each area here. Now you could put a little bit on the threads too, but I wouldn't advise putting too much on there, just because you don't want to get it on your brake rotor. Put 2 lug nuts on. Go for the tire. And that's to hold this in place while we put the caliper back on. Now to get the caliper back on, just make sure your brake pads are still open like that. Move. Remove that. We can torque these 2 bolts to 90 foot-pounds. Okay, that's 90 foot-pounds for those. After you get those caliper bolts tightened to 90 foot-pounds, we'll go ahead and torque the tie rod ends, and these are going to be 67 foot-pounds, and these are 21 millimeter for the castle nut. You just rotate your steering knuckle. Once the tie rod castle nut is torqued and cotter pinned, we can go ahead and tighten up this nut right here. This would be what they would use for your alignment. They would take this off and twist it in or out for your alignment if needed. Just a little bit. Doesn't need to be super tight. After that, we can tighten up all these other bolts that go to the spindle that are attached to these brackets. So the first one we'll do is this top bracket that goes onto the control arm. And that's going to be just torqued as needed. You just want to tighten it down so it's not going to come out. Now that's going to be a 10 millimeter. So tighten that up. Next is going to be the brake line bracket bolt. That'll be this one right here. And there's going to be two of them. One here and one near the bottom here. So I'll put this one on. So after putting a little bit of silicone grease on the O-ring for the ABS sensor plug there, go ahead and torque this to 71 inch-pounds. And this is a 10 millimeter. After you've torqued your castle nut for your tie rod and put the cotter pin in, you can go ahead and lube your ball joint or your tie rod in, anything that has a lube point that you replaced. You want to go ahead and do that now. And I'm just using some all-purpose grease. And then I do have a lube point on my lower ball joint, but it was full of grease, so I'm not going to do it at this time. Go ahead and just clean that off. It does come with a rubber cap. Just put that back on. Now before we tighten up the control arm bolt, so once everything's lubed, the next step will be to tighten up the center hub bolt. And this should be 175 foot-pounds. Now there's two ways to do it. You can take out your center hub cap of your wheel assembly, put your wheel back on, put two lug nuts on, lower the vehicle, and then tighten this, and then remove your wheel assembly, put your hubcap back in to where it goes, and then put your dust cap back on too before you put your wheel back on. But I'm going to have somebody hold the brakes, and while they're holding the brakes, I'm going to go ahead and tighten this to 175 foot-pounds. After you get your center hub nut on, you'll want to put your safety ring on, and if it doesn't line up, just maneuver it to another position. Go ahead and put your cotter pin in and open up your cotter pin. And then before you put your center cap on, just put a little bit of anti-seize around the edge here, and that'll keep it from seizing, and it'll make it easier to take off in the future. and use a rubber mallet to put it on. So once the vehicle is lowered, you can torque these to 82 foot-pounds and just go in a crosswise motion or a crosswise pattern. Next, we're going to need to tighten up upper control arm bolts. Now the top one's going to be 87 foot-pounds. So this is going to be done once the tires are back on and you push down the suspension a little bit just to get it to settle to the riding height. Now your upper control arm bolts are going to be 19 millimeter. So you're going to have one on each side. The nut's going to be 19 millimeter. So after you've torqued those to 87 foot-pounds, if you had any relays that you may have taken out or moved, you'll go ahead and just put those back on now. And I believe this is a 10 millimeter. The bolts and the nuts for the upper control arms are going to be 19 millimeter, and the bolts for the relay and the wiring bundle here is going to be 10 millimeter. You could go ahead and put your rock guard back on. And then after that, after all that work, I would definitely go to an alignment shop and have them check your alignment. Well, this has been Mike from Mike's Do It Yourself. Good luck on your next home or automotive project. Thanks for watching. And don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment.